At 39 years old, Everett Williams made an annual salary of $63,000 as an occupational therapist. It was a good, honest living, one that allowed him to provide for his family in their modest but loved Kensington duplex, a two-story home they'd bought for $180,000 right after their daughter Nia was born. He drove a 2014 Honda Civic with a small dent in the rear bumper, a car that was fully paid off. On his wrist, he wore an $89 Timex watch his wife, Simone, had given him for their 5th anniversary. He was a man defined by practicality, by quiet service, and by a deep, abiding love for his wife and child. But on this particular Sunday evening, sitting at a 20-foot-long mahogany dining table in his mother-in-law's $1.6 million Chestnut Hill estate, he felt like none of those things mattered. He felt small. The air in the cavernous dining room was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and the faint, cloying smell of old money. Sunlight, heavy and golden, streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing over a collection of antique silver service pieces that were probably worth more than his car. Rosalind, his mother-in-law, sat at the head of the table, a queen on her throne. She was a striking black woman in her late 60s, her skin smooth and deep brown, her salt and pepper hair styled in elegant, intricate twists. Tonight, she wore a deep blue St. John knit dress that likely cost more than 2 of Everett's paychecks, a simple $3,000 garment for a casual family dinner. "Everett, darling," Rosalind said, her voice smooth as polished glass, but with an edge that always found its mark. "How is work?" She said the word work as if it were a slightly distasteful substance she'd found on the sole of her $500 Ferragamo shoe. This was outrage moment number 1. "It's good, Rosalind. I have a new pediatric case, a little boy with sensory processing challenges. We're making some real progress," he said, his voice earnest. Rosalind offered a thin, tight smile. "That's so noble." Her eyes flickered to Simone, then back to him. It must be very fulfilling, doing such charitable work. Outrage moment number 2. The implication hung in the air, as heavy as the humidity outside. Noble, but not profitable. Fulfilling, but not impressive. Simone, beautiful and tense beside him, shifted in her chair. Her own dress, a gift from her mother, was a $700 Diane von Furstenberg wrap dress that looked out of place in their Kensington life but fit perfectly in this one. She picked at her food, a piece of salmon that had been catered from a restaurant where the tasting menu cost $250 per person. She didn't meet his eyes. She didn't defend him. She just existed in the uncomfortable space between the world she had married into and the one she had come from. Everett looked down at his plate, at the perfectly arranged microgreens, and felt the familiar, crushing weight of his wife's family's disappointment. He had no idea this dinner was merely a prelude, a quiet, civilized overture to a war that had been raging against him for 5 long years. He had no idea how wrong he was about the foundation of his own life. Do you know what it feels like to be the one person in the room everyone is counting on to fail? Let us know in the comments if you've ever felt underestimated, and stick around to see just how badly they misjudge this good man. The facade of their life was built on small, sturdy moments of domestic normalcy. Their Kensington duplex, with its creaky wooden floors and walls adorned with Nia's vibrant crayon-scrawled masterpieces, was a world away from the cold grandeur of Chestnut Hill. Here love was not measured in dollars, but in actions. It was Everett, at 6:15 a.m. every morning, carefully packing Nia's lunchbox. A turkey and cheese sandwich, a small bag of carrots, an apple, and always a little note written on a napkin. It was the smell of coffee brewing in their 10-year-old $40 Mr. Coffee machine. Their life had a rhythm. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, Everett worked late, and Simone would pick Nia up from her after-school program. On those nights, he'd come home to the sound of them laughing, often finding them curled up on their $600 Wayfair sofa, watching a Disney movie. Their joint savings account, which they had painstakingly grown to just over $100,000, was for the future, for Nia's college, for a new roof, for the possibility of one day opening his own private practice. It was their dream, a tangible thing built from a decade of careful planning and deferred gratification. He remembered the day they bought the duplex. It was a rainy Saturday in March, 11 years ago. The house was listed at $189,000, and they'd negotiated it down to $180,000. Everett, then just an intern making $32,000 a year, had presented Simone with a detailed budget he'd made in an Excel spreadsheet. "If we're careful," he'd said, his voice full of hope, "we can do this. We can own a piece of Philadelphia." Simone had laughed, her eyes shining. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him right there on the damp pavement in front of the little house on Clementine Street. "I don't need a spreadsheet, Ev. I just need you." That was the woman he had married, the one who saw him, not his paycheck, the one who believed in us more than me. Even then, Rosalind had cast a long shadow. At their housewarming party, she'd walked through the small rooms, her lips pursed. "It's cozy," she'd pronounced, running a manicured finger along a windowsill. "A good starter home. Of course, you'll want to move to a better school district before the baby comes." They had been married for 2 years. They hadn't even started trying for a child. But Rosalind was already planning their exit, already deeming their life insufficient. Now that pressure was a constant, low-grade hum in their marriage. The contrast was a weekly assault. Sundays in Chestnut Hill, with its sprawling lawns and hushed, tree-lined streets, followed by Mondays back in Kensington, with the rumbling of the L train and the vibrant, chaotic energy of the neighborhood. For Everett, their home was a sanctuary. For Simone, he was beginning to fear it had become a cage. He would watch her scroll through her sister's social media feeds, her face tight with an emotion he couldn't quite name. He saw pictures of Chloe's 3-week trip to Italy, a $20,000 excursion, and Brianna's new Audi Q7, a $70,000 SUV. They were living the life Rosalind believed they were all entitled to, and Simone was not. One evening, he came home to find Nia at the kitchen table, her tongue stuck out in concentration as she drew. Her beautiful coils, woven with the colorful plastic beads she loved, clicked softly as she moved her head. "Look, Daddy," she said, holding up a piece of construction paper. It was a drawing of their house, a simple, boxy duplex with a bright red door. "This is our castle," she announced. Everett's heart swelled. He taped the drawing to the refrigerator, right next to a grocery list and a bill from the electric company. In their world, a child's drawing and a $78 utility bill shared the same sacred space. That was the normalcy they had built. A delicate, precious thing he would soon realize was under systematic attack. The campaign to dismantle his marriage had been a masterclass in psychological warfare, waged not with shouting matches, but with expertly placed whispers, condescending kindness, and the slow, corrosive drip of financial temptation. The first major salvo had come 5 years ago, on Nia's 3rd birthday. It was a small party in their backyard, a 20 by 20-foot patch of grass he'd painstakingly cultivated. He'd spent $150 at Home Depot on a small plastic slide for Nia. His friends from the neighborhood were there, their kids running through the sprinkler. Rosalind and her daughters, Chloe and Brianna, arrived an hour late, dressed for a garden party at the Hamptons, not a toddler's birthday in Kensington. Rosalind had pulled Simone aside, near the struggling rose bushes Everett was so proud of. He was grilling hot dogs on his $40 charcoal grill, but he could hear their conversation drift over. "Simone, darling," Rosalind began, her voice a conspiratorial murmur, "I've been thinking. You're so brilliant, so creative. That architecture degree is just gathering dust. I was talking to a friend who runs a venture capital fund. They're looking for boutique firms to invest in. Simone's eyes had lit up. Really, Mom? Of course, Rosalind said, placing a hand on Simone's arm. But these are serious people. They invest in individuals, in visionaries. You'd need to be completely independent, unencumbered. Outrage moment number 3. The word just hung there, unencumbered. It was a delicate, precise dagger. It meant without a husband whose modest income would be a liability on a financial statement. Everett felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He flipped a hot dog with more force than necessary. Simone had come to him later that night, her mind buzzing with possibilities. My mom thinks I could start my own firm, Ev. He had been supportive, of course. That's amazing, honey. What would it take? But the word unencumbered echoed in his mind. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him, that this wasn't about empowering Simone. It was about extracting her. The pressure intensified over the years with Chloe and Brianna, the aunties, acting as Rosalind's lieutenants. At every family gathering, they formed a tight, impenetrable circle with Simone, their voices a low hum of discontent. Simone, you have to come with us to Aspen this year, Brianna would say, flashing her $3,000 Cartier Love bracelet. We're renting a chalet. It's only $15,000 for the week. Outrage moment number 4. I can't, Bri. Everett can't get the time off, and we can't afford it, Simone would reply, her voice small. Don't say we, Chloe would cut in, her tone sharp. You can afford it. Mom would help. It's him that's holding you back. Outrage moment number 5. They spoke of Everett as if he wasn't in the next room, as if he were a piece of furniture, a temporary obstacle. They'd talk loudly about their friend, a divorce attorney in Center City who was a total shark, and whose billing rate was a staggering $1,200 per hour. She gets her clients everything, Brianna would say, a pointed look at Simone. Everything they deserve. Outrage, moment number 6. The poison worked. Slowly, Simone began to change. The woman who had kissed him on a rainy street and said, I just need you, was replaced by someone who spoke the language of her mother. Money became the central topic of their lives. Not the lack of it, but the pursuit of more. About a year ago, she approached him with a proposal. My mom has this amazing investment opportunity, she said, avoiding his eyes. It's a family trust she's setting up. The returns are incredible. She said if we put some money in, she can really make it grow for us. Everett was hesitant. Simone, that's our emergency fund. That's Nia's college money. It's over $100,000. Her face hardened. It's not doing anything, just sitting in a savings account earning 0.1%, Everett. My mother is a genius with money. You have to trust her. It's my family trying to help us. Outrage moment number 7. The way she said my family created a chasm between them. He reluctantly agreed, not wanting to fight, wanting to believe she still saw them as a team. A month later, he checked their joint savings account. A withdrawal. $25,000. His breath caught. He approached Simone that evening as she was getting ready for bed. Hey, I saw the transfer. You put the first bit into the trust? Yes, she said, her back to him as she applied a ridiculously expensive $150 jar of La Mer face cream. Mom handled it. It's all set. She was brisk, dismissive. There was no discussion. It was a decree. Outrage moment number 8. He had no idea how much worse it was about to get. The second withdrawal came 6 months later, $40,000. This time he confronted her more directly. Simone, that's a huge amount of money. We didn't even talk about it. There was nothing to talk about, she snapped, her voice rising. It was a time-sensitive opportunity. Mom said we had to move fast. Why don't you trust me? Why do you have to question everything? Outrage moment number 9. Her phone buzzed incessantly on the counter. He saw the names on the screen. Mom, Auntie Chloe, Auntie Bry. A constant stream of instructions and encouragement. The arguments became more frequent, more bitter. She started staying late at her architecture firm, taking on extra projects she said they needed for the money. But she was also having dinner with her mother and sisters 2 or 3 times a week. They were planning sessions, he would later realize, strategy meetings for her exit. The final withdrawal happened 3 weeks ago. $29,000. He saw the transaction alert on his phone and felt a wave of nausea. Their savings, a decade of his $63,000 salary being stretched and saved, was now just a little over $6,000, $94,000 gone. That night, she brought it up. The word. "Everett," she said, sitting on the edge of their bed, not looking at him. "I think I need some space." "Space? What do you mean, space?" "I think maybe we should separate," she said, the words coming out in a rehearsed rush. "Just for a little while, so I can figure things out. We've grown apart. We want different things." Outrage moment number 10. "Different things?" he asked, his voice hollow. "I want you and Nia. What else is there?" "There's a whole world out there, Everett," she said, and in that moment he heard her mother's voice, clear as a bell. "A world you're not interested in." Outrage moment number 11. It was the cruelest thing she had ever said to him. He felt the floor drop out from beneath him. He was losing her, and he didn't even understand why. Or rather, he was beginning to understand all too well. The money, the pressure, the whispers, it had all been leading to this. The demolition was nearly complete. The final, fatal blow to the facade came not with a bang, but with a buzz. It was a Tuesday night at 9:14 p.m. Nia was fast asleep in her room, her small chest rising and falling in the gentle rhythm of childhood dreams. The house was quiet. Everett was in the living room, sitting on their worn sofa, the television off. He was trying to read a book, but the words blurred together. He was replaying that last conversation with Simone in his head, trying to find a thread to pull, a way to fix the unraveling tapestry of his marriage. His phone, a 3-year-old Samsung Galaxy he'd bought for $200, vibrated on the cushion next to him. He glanced at the screen. A new message from Rosalind. His heart gave a little lurch. A late-night text from his mother-in-law was never good news. It usually meant a demand disguised as a request or a criticism veiled as a concern. He braced himself and opened the message. It wasn't what he expected. It wasn't a string of words. It was an image, a screenshot. His brow furrowed. Why would Rosalind send him a screenshot? He tapped it, and the image filled his screen. It was a group chat from a messaging app. The name of the group displayed at the top was Project Freedom. The participants listed were Rosalind, Chloe, Brianna, and Simone. A cold dread, sharp and immediate, washed over him. He began to read. The messages were from that very afternoon. Chloe, is she finally going to do it this week? Brianna, the lawyer is ready. Just needs the final transfer to clear. She said she'd call Simone tomorrow. Rosalind, she's wavering. He's good with the child. It makes her sentimental. Rosalind, I just sent her the Zillow listing for the Rittenhouse condo, a $3 million penthouse, a reminder of what's waiting for her. And then the final, devastating message, the one that sucked all the air from his lungs. Rosalind, I can't wait until she leaves him. 5 years is long enough to be stuck in that little house with that little man. Outrage moments 12, 13, 14, and 15 landed like a volley of punches. Little house, little man, Project Freedom. The words echoed in the silent room. His world, which had been slowly tilting, suddenly capsized. He felt a strange, detached calm, the kind that follows a massive explosion. The ringing in his ears was the sound of his life being vaporized. He scrolled down. Below the screenshot was a new text from Rosalind, sent just moments after the image. A message clearly intended for the Project Freedom group, but sent to him by a fatal, careless slip of the thumb. Rosalind. See? She's dragging her feet. We need to apply more pressure. One wrong tap. That was all it took. One wrong tap to expose 5 years of conspiracy. One wrong tap to unravel everything. Everett stared at the screen, his mind working with a chilling clarity. He looked at the timestamp on the screenshot of the group chat. 4:30 p.m. today, he thought back. The lawyer is ready. Just needs the final transfer to clear. The final transfer. The $29,000 that had vanished from their account 3 weeks ago. With trembling hands, he closed the messaging app and opened his banking app. His fingers moved with a mechanical precision. He scrolled back through the transaction history of their joint savings account. There it was. The first withdrawal, $25,000. Date, 11 months ago. He remembered that week perfectly. Simone had been distant and agitated after a long Sunday dinner at Rosalind's. That must have been when they applied the first round of pressure. He kept scrolling. The second withdrawal, $40,000. Date, 6 months ago. He remembered that too. It was right after Chloe and Brianna had taken Simone out for a lavish, sisters-only weekend at a 5-star hotel in New York. A $3,000 getaway Rosalind had paid for. More pressure. And the last one. The final transfer. $29,000. 3 weeks ago. The day before Simone had first mentioned needing space. $94,000. It wasn't an investment. It wasn't a family trust designed to help them. It was an extraction. A systematic plundering of their shared future to fund his wife's escape. They were paying for her to leave him with their own money. The sheer, calculated cruelty of it was breathtaking. He wasn't just being left, he was being robbed, humiliated, erased. He saved the screenshot. He took a photo of his phone screen with Nia's old iPad, just to have a backup. He emailed the images to himself. He felt nothing. Not sadness, not rage, not heartbreak. Just a profound, terrifying emptiness. The man who had been trying to fix his marriage 5 minutes ago was gone. In his place was someone else. Someone cold, methodical, and brutally clear about what he had to do next. The next morning, the sun rose at 6:03 a.m. over Kensington, casting long shadows down Clementine Street. Everett was already in the kitchen. The scent of coffee from the $40 machine filled the air, a scent of profound and practiced normalcy. He was spreading cream cheese on a bagel, his movements deliberate, unhurried. He was playing a role now, the sad, defeated husband, a role they had written for him. He was determined to play it to perfection. Simone came downstairs at 7:15 a.m. She looked tired, her eyes puffy. She was wearing a $200 silk pajama set, another gift from her mother. She hesitated in the doorway, clutching a coffee mug. "Morning," he said, his voice even. He didn't look at her. "Morning," she mumbled. She cleared her throat. "Hey, did you get a weird text from my mom last night? I think she sent something to the wrong person." This was the moment. The test. Everett paused, the knife hovering over the bagel. He turned to face her, arranging his features into a mask of mild confusion. "No, I didn't see anything. My phone was on silent." "Why? Everything okay?" He watched the tension drain from her shoulders. A wave of visible, palpable relief washed over her face. She thought she was safe. She thought he was still the fool. It was the 16th and perhaps most infuriating outrage moment yet. Oh, no, it's nothing, she said quickly, forcing a little laugh. She's just losing her mind with technology. Sent me a picture of her hydrangeas meant for her garden club or something. Just wanted to make sure she didn't bother you. Nope, didn't see a thing, he said, turning back to his task. Bagel? No, I'm not hungry. He felt a cold, hard satisfaction settle in his chest. She had no idea she was a dead woman walking. They all were. He dropped Nia at school at 8:30 a.m., kissing her forehead and watching until she disappeared into the brick building. Then, he drove not to his clinic, but to a small park a few blocks away. He sat in his 2014 Honda Civic and pulled out his phone. He had spent 2 hours after Simone fell asleep the night before researching family law attorneys and forensic accountants in Philadelphia. His first call was to a law firm in Center City. Hello, my name is Everett Williams. I need to schedule a consultation with a senior partner regarding a divorce and potential financial fraud. Yes, I can pay the consultation fee. His second call was to a highly recommended forensic CPA. Hello, Mr. Chen. My name is Everett Williams. I was referred by a colleague. I have some bank statements and corresponding digital evidence that I need analyzed on an urgent basis. I suspect fraudulent conveyance of marital assets. He used the term he'd learned at 2 a.m. from a legal website. It felt good in his mouth. Precise. Powerful. That evening, the charade continued. He made dinner. Spaghetti and meatballs, Naya's favorite. Simone came home late, around 8 p.m. She looked energized, a stark contrast to her demeanor that morning. She had, he suspected, spent the day conferring with her mother and sisters, emboldened by the belief that their secret was safe. She sat down at the kitchen table while he was serving Nia. Everett, we need to talk, she said, her tone firm. It was the voice of a person who held all the cards. Okay, he said, placing a plate in front of his daughter. I've been thinking a lot, and this separation, I think it needs to be permanent. I think we should get a divorce. He looked at her, letting his face fall. He summoned the image of himself from 48 hours ago, the confused, heartbroken husband. Simone, are you sure? I'm sure, she said. And I think we can be adults about this. No need to get expensive lawyers involved and waste money. We can just split everything 50-50, sign the papers and move on. It's the cleanest way. Outrage moment number 17. The audacity was stunning. She wanted to split the remaining $6,000 after she and her family had stolen $94,000. She wanted it to be clean. He took a deep breath and nodded slowly, as if processing a heavy blow. Okay, Simone, he said, his voice quiet and thick with manufactured pain. If that's what you want. Whatever you think is best. She looked pleased. He was being compliant. The little man was making it easy. Later that week, his phone rang. It was Rosalind. Everett, darling. Her voice dripped with false sympathy. Simone told me the news. I am just so sorry to hear you two are having trouble. A pause. I just want you to know, whatever happens, we'll always make sure you're taken care of. The condescension was a physical force, a wave of smug superiority. Outrage. Moment number 18. She was offering him scraps from his own table. Thank you, Rosalind, he said, his voice a perfect instrument of defeated politeness. That's very kind of you. He hung up the phone and felt nothing but the cold, steady hum of the machine he had become. The time for feeling was over. The time for strategy had begun. They had no idea what was coming. The law offices of Adebayo and Associates were on the 45th floor of a glass tower in Center City, a world of hushed carpets and panoramic views of the Philadelphia skyline. The air itself felt expensive. Everett, in his best and only suit, a $400 ensemble from Macy's he'd bought for a wedding 5 years ago, felt out of place, but he didn't let it show. He clutched his worn leather briefcase, which contained the entire architecture of his wife's family's betrayal. Ms. Amina Adebayo was a formidable presence. A tall, elegant black woman in her 50s, she wore an $8,000 Armani suit the color of slate, her locks styled in a chic, intricate updo. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. Her fee, she stated, was $650 per hour. Everett nodded. He would pay it from the emergency credit card he kept for true disasters. This, he had decided, qualified. "Mr. Williams," she began, her voice calm and direct, "walk me through it." For the next hour, Everett laid it all out. He didn't editorialize. He didn't speak of heartbreak. He spoke of facts, dates, and numbers. He showed her the printout of the screenshot from Rosalind's phone. He slid the bank statements across the polished mahogany desk, each of the 3 withdrawals highlighted in yellow. He recounted Simone's suggestion to avoid lawyers and split everything 50-50. Ms. Adebayo listened without interruption, her intelligent eyes missing nothing. When he was finished, she leaned back in her high-backed leather chair, her expression grim. "Mr. Williams," she said, her voice low and serious, "I want to be very clear. This is not a simple divorce. This is a coordinated, multi-year conspiracy to defraud you of significant marital assets. The legal term is fraudulent conveyance. They have committed a tort against you." The validation was like a bracing wind. He wasn't crazy. He wasn't just a jilted husband. He was a victim of a calculated crime. "What can we do?" he asked. "We can be aggressive," she said, a flicker of steel in her eyes. "Very aggressive." Her first call was to Mr. David Chen, the forensic accountant Everett had already contacted. Ms. Adebayo put him on speakerphone. "Mr. Chen, Amina Adebayo, I have our client, Mr. Williams, here with me. What have you found?" Mr. Chen's voice was crisp and efficient, billing at a rate of $400 an hour. "The pattern is undeniable, counselor. The money moved from their joint savings account to Ms. Williams' personal checking account, and from there, within hours, to a Delaware-based LLC named Chestnut Legacy Holdings." "And who controls this LLC?" Ms. Adebayo asked. "The registered agent and sole manager listed on the formation documents," Mr. Chen said, "is Rosalind Pierce, Ms. Williams' mother." Everett's blood ran cold. It was even more brazen than he had imagined. "Furthermore," Mr. Chen continued, "the timestamps on the text messages Mr. Williams provided are damning. The message from the sister, Brianna, mentioning that the lawyer is ready and needs the final transfer to clear, is dated at 10:22 a.m. on the day before the final $29,000 withdrawal. The other texts from Rosalind about applying pressure directly precede the other 2 major transfers. A judge will see this as clear evidence of intent and coordination." The pieces clicked into place, forming a picture of breathtaking arrogance. Ms. Adebayo thanked Mr. Chen and hung up. She turned to Everett, her focus absolute. "Here is the plan," she said. "First, we file for divorce on your behalf, immediately. We will be the petitioner. That gives us control of the narrative from the start. Second, concurrently, we file for an emergency ex parte injunction to freeze all assets belonging to Chestnut Legacy Holdings LLC, citing the evidence of fraudulent conveyance. We will argue that there is an imminent risk of those funds being further concealed or dissipated." She leaned forward. "And third, the most important part, the execution. We will have all parties served simultaneously. Your wife, Simone, will be served at her office, in public. Your mother-in-law, Rosalind, will be served at her home, or wherever she may be. The sisters, Chloe and Brianna, will also be served, as they are named as co-conspirators in the civil complaint that will accompany the injunction. We will give them no time to talk, no time to align their stories. We will sow chaos." Everett listened, a sense of grim purpose settling over him. This wasn't revenge. This was justice. This was accountability. As he was packing his briefcase to leave, he paused. He reached into an inner pocket and pulled out a folded piece of construction paper. He smoothed it out on the desk. It was Nia's drawing. The little house, the red door, the three figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. "This is my daughter Nia," he said, his voice thick for the first time that day. "She's 8. A few nights ago she gave this to me. She used a dark brown crayon for me and her mom, and a lighter brown one for herself. She asked me, 'Daddy, are we black?' And I said, 'Yes, sweetie, we are.' She calls this our castle." Ms. Adebayo looked at the drawing, her stern expression softening for just a moment. She looked at the three figures, a happy black family drawn, with the pure, uncomplicated love of a child. There was no grandmother in the picture. There was no $1.6 million estate. There was just a family in their home. "She's the reason," Everett said, his voice quiet but firm. "They weren't just stealing money, Miss Adebayo. They were trying to steal her future, her home, her father." Ms. Adebayo nodded slowly. "I understand, Mr. Williams," she said, "and we are going to make sure they do not succeed." He folded the drawing carefully and placed it back in his pocket. It was his why. It was the fuel for the cold, hard engine of the machine he had to be. Friday arrived under a blanket of gray, overcast sky. The air was heavy, charged with unspoken energy. At 10:45 a.m., Everett sat in his car in the same park where he'd made the first phone calls, his $89 Timex watch ticking on his wrist. Ms. Adebayo had given him a precise timeline. The operation was about to begin. His phone was set to record all incoming calls. He had become a silent command center in a war of his own making. Timestamp, 11 a.m. sharp. In a sleek, glass-walled office in a prestigious Center City architecture firm, Simone was in a meeting, presenting a design concept to a wealthy client. She was confident, articulate, at the top of her game. A man in a simple blazer, a process server, entered the conference room. He walked directly to her. "Simone Williams?" he asked. She nodded, annoyed at the interruption. He handed her a thick manila envelope. "You've been served," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion, and then he turned and walked out. In front of her boss and her firm's most important client, Simone tore open the envelope. Her face, luminous and proud moments before, turned a ghastly shade of white as she read the words: "Petition for dissolution of marriage and summons to appear. Civil complaint for fraudulent conveyance." Timestamp, 11:05 a.m. Across town, in the hushed, opulent dining room of the Chestnut Hill Country Club, Rosalind Pierce was presiding over her weekly book club meeting. The topic was a biography of a Gilded Age heiress. A plate of exquisite $18 macarons sat untouched before her. A second process server, a woman this time, approached the table with quiet purpose. "Rosalind Pierce?" she asked. Rosalind looked up, irritated. The woman placed an identical manila envelope on the table, right next to the macarons. "You've been served." Rosalind's friends fell silent, their eyes wide. She stared at the envelope as if it were a snake. Outrage moment number 19. The public humiliation, the sheer audacity of it, was a direct assault on her carefully constructed world of influence and respectability. Timestamp, 11:10 a.m. Simultaneously, the attack branched out. At a trendy hot yoga studio on Walnut Street, a third server waited patiently outside the steamy room. When a flushed and sweaty Chloe emerged, he stepped forward. "Chloe Benson?" he asked, handing her the papers. Her serene post-yoga glow vanished, replaced by a mask of disbelief and fury. Miles away, at an exclusive Pilates studio in Rittenhouse Square, A fourth server intercepted Brianna Shaw in the lobby. Brianna Shaw? The papers were thrust into her hand. Her perfect, curated life was suddenly, violently interrupted. The coordinated strike was complete. The chaos Ms. Adebayo had promised had been sown. Now Everett waited. The first message arrived at 11:15 a.m. It was a text from Simone. Simone. Text. Everett. What is this? Call me now. He didn't reply. Timestamp 11:17 a.m. His phone rang. It was Simone. He let it go to voicemail. The recording began, her voice a frantic, high-pitched screech. Simone. Voicemail. Everett, you don't understand. You have to call this off. This is a mistake. My mom was just helping us. She was investing for us. You can't do this. You're destroying our family. Call me back. Timestamp 11:20 a.m. A new call. Blocked number. He knew who it was. He let it go to voicemail. Rosalind's voice, unlike her daughter's, was not panicked. It was low, guttural, and seething with rage. Rosalind, voicemail. Everett Williams, you have made a grave, grave mistake. I don't know what pathetic little lawyer you've hired, but you will call them off this instant. You have no idea who you are dealing with. Outrage, moment number 20. The threat was unmistakable. Timestamp, 11:30 a.m. A text from a number he recognized as Chloe's. Chloe, text. Wow. After everything we did for you, unbelievable. Outrage moment 21. The gall was breathtaking. Everything we did for you. They had robbed him, and in their minds, they were the benefactors. He sat in the quiet of his car, the gray light filtering through the windshield. He felt a profound sense of detachment, as if he were watching a movie. Timestamp, 12 p.m. Another call from Rosalind, another voicemail. The tone had shifted from pure rage to self-righteous justification. Rosalind, voicemail. That money was an investment in Simone's future, a future you could never provide her. Do you have any idea how humiliating it is for her, for me, to tell people she lives in that dreadful little house in Kensington? I was protecting my daughter from a life of mediocrity. This is what you get for being ungrateful. Outrage moment 22. She was admitting it, confessing her motive into his voicemail, creating evidence with her own arrogant words. Timestamp, 1 p.m. A call from Simone again. This time, her voice was broken. She was crying. Simone, voicemail. Please, Ev. Please don't do this. We can fix it. I was wrong. I'll give the money back. I'll do anything. Just don't do this in court. Please, it's my job. My reputation. Please, think of Naya. Using their daughter's name now, the one person they had all failed to consider. Timestamp, 2:30 p.m. Rosalind again. The anger and justification had evaporated, replaced by a new, unfamiliar tone. Pleading. Rosalind, voicemail. Everett, please, listen to me. This injunction, the timing is critical. It will ruin a very important family transfer. It's a legacy matter, years in the making. It has nothing to do with you. You can have the $94,000. I'll write you a check today. Just call your lawyer and sign the document to release the freeze. We can make this all go away quietly. He smiled, a thin, mirthless smile. He finally understood. The $94,000 was a pittance to them, a rounding error. The LLC, Chestnut Legacy Holdings, was the vehicle for something much, much bigger. By freezing it, his little legal action had thrown a wrench into a multi-million-dollar machine. He had hit them where they truly lived, not in their pride, but in their principle. Timestamp, 4 p.m. One final voicemail from Rosalind. It was a long, rambling, unhinged monologue, a torrent of blame, self-pity, and rage. She talked about how he was never good enough, how he'd been a disappointment from day one, how he was ungrateful, how he was dragging their good family name through the mud. Her voice cracked. The message ended with a raw, ugly sob. The queen had been dethroned, and she didn't know what to do. The silence that followed was the sweetest sound Everett had ever heard. The consequences cascaded with the brutal efficiency of a line of dominoes. The world that Rosalind, Simone, and the sisters had built, a world insulated by money and status, crumbled under the weight of a single, well-placed legal filing. First and foremost was the injunction. Ms. Adebayo's suspicions had been correct. The emergency hearing was held the following Wednesday. Rosalind's high-priced, $1,200 an hour lawyer argued vehemently that Chestnut Legacy Holdings LLC was a private family entity and its assets were unrelated to the marital dispute. But Ms. Adebayo, calm and precise, presented the evidence. Mr. Chen's forensic accounting report, which traced the $94,000 directly from Everett and Simone's joint account into the LLC, and the verbatim transcripts of Rosalind's own voicemails, where she admitted the money was taken to fund Simone's future and pleaded for the freeze to be lifted to protect a larger legacy matter. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who had seen her share of privileged arrogance, was not impressed by Rosalind's lawyer. She upheld the injunction. The assets of Chestnut Legacy Holdings were frozen solid. It was then that the true cost of their scheme became apparent. The LLC was the primary vehicle for a complex real estate transaction. Rosalind and her husband were in the final stages of leveraging their $1.6 million Chestnut Hill estate to secure a $10 million stake in a new luxury condominium development. The frozen $94,000 was contractually commingled with the larger pool of assets, and the injunction brought the entire deal to a screeching halt. The developers, facing deadlines and penalties, pulled out. The deal, which had been years in the making, collapsed. The estimated loss in opportunity costs and non-refundable deposits was later calculated to be just over $450,000. Rosalind's attempt to steal $94,000 had cost her family nearly $500,000. The personal fallout was just as devastating. For Rosalind, the public nature of the humiliation was a fate worse than financial loss. The court filings were public records. The words fraudulent conveyance and conspiracy became the hottest gossip in the Chestnut Hill Rittenhouse Square social circuit she had dominated for decades. She was quietly asked to step down from the board of the prestigious Philadelphia Children's Charity, a position she had chaired for 10 years. Her friends stopped returning her calls. The queen was now a pariah, trapped in her magnificent $1.6 million palace, a monument to her own hubris. For Simone, the consequences were swift and total. Her firm, which catered to an elite clientele that valued discretion above all else, could not tolerate the scandal, the public serving, the allegations of fraud against her own husband. It was a reputational risk they were unwilling to take. 2 weeks after being served, she was called into her boss's office and summarily fired, her 6-figure salary gone in an instant. With no income and her access to the family trust frozen, she had no choice but to move back home. Into the guest room of her mother's mansion. The $3 million Rittenhouse penthouse from the Zillow listing was now a cruel joke. She was 38 years old, unemployed, disgraced, and living under the roof of the very woman who had orchestrated her ruin. The sisters, Chloe and Brianna, did not escape unscathed. As named co-conspirators in the civil complaint, they were dragged into the legal morass. They were forced to hire their own attorneys to the tune of over $30,000 each, a cost that infuriated their wealthy husbands, who had been blissfully unaware of the Project Freedom plot. The scandal introduced a poison into their own marriages, creating fractures and resentments that would not easily heal. Their perfect, Instagrammable lives were suddenly marred by legal bills and spousal fury. The divorce settlement was a formality. The judge, having reviewed the evidence of the fraud, was deeply unsympathetic to Simone's position. Everett was awarded the full $94,000, returned to him from the frozen LLC. He was also awarded sole ownership of the Kensington duplex, its value having appreciated to $215,000, free and clear of any claim from her. Simone received no portion of his pension and a minimal transitional alimony for only 12 months. She was left with nothing but her share of her family's shame and a mountain of legal debt. The final quiet moment of vindication came during a deposition 6 months later. Simone's new, less expensive lawyer was trying to paint Everett as a bitter, vindictive man. "Mr. Williams," the lawyer asked, "why did you feel the need to pursue this scorched earth path? Why not just take the money your mother-in-law offered and walk away quietly?" Everett sat perfectly still. He looked across the table, not at the lawyer, but directly at Rosalind, who was forced to be in attendance. He thought of the years of quiet humiliations, the condescending remarks, the systematic dismantling of his wife's love for him. He thought of the screenshot. Then he spoke, his voice calm, clear, and utterly devastating. "Because," he said, his eyes locked on Rosalind's, "after 5 years of being stuck in that little house with that little man, I decided it was time to protect what was mine." He had used her own words, the very words she had typed in secret, as a weapon. The room went absolutely silent. Rosalind's face went pale, a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. She had been exposed, judged, and condemned by her own cruelty. In that moment, Everett felt no anger, no triumph. He felt only a profound, quiet peace. It was over. 2 years later. The world was different. The gray, overcast skies of his battle had given way to a steady, warming sunlight. Everett was no longer just Everett Williams, occupational therapist. He was Everett Williams, owner and founder. He stood not in a cramped clinic cubicle, but in the bright, airy reception area of his own practice. A simple, elegant sign on the glass door read, "Williams and Son Pediatric Therapy." He had named it for his late father, a carpenter who had taught him the value of building things that last. Using the $94,000 from the settlement and a small business loan, he had created this space. It was a haven for children with challenges, filled with vibrant colors, specialized sensory equipment, and the sound of laughter. His practice was thriving, specializing in affordable care for families who couldn't navigate the labyrinth of insurance and expensive private clinics. He was now earning over $120,000 a year, on his own terms, doing the work he loved. The Kensington duplex, his little house, was now a rental property, generating a steady $1,200 a month in passive income. He and Naya had moved into a comfortable 3-bedroom apartment in Mount Airy, a neighborhood known for its green spaces and strong community bonds. Their apartment overlooked a sprawling community garden, where they spent their Saturday mornings planting tomatoes and kale. Nia, now 10, was flourishing. She was a happy, secure, and deeply loved child. She sat at a small table in the waiting area of his office, her homework spread out before her. Her coils were longer now, still adorned with the colorful beads she loved, which clicked softly as she wrote. She was at peace. The turmoil that had engulfed her parents' lives had been a storm she'd never had to weather, a testament to the protective wall Everett had built around her. There was a soft knock on the office door. It was Simone. This was their new normal. She picked Naya up 3 afternoons a week. She looked different, humbled. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by a simple dress from a department store. The hardness in her eyes had been replaced by a deep, abiding sadness. She had a part-time job now, doing drafting work for a small construction company, making a fraction of her old salary. "Hey," she said quietly. "Hey," Everett replied, his tone gentle but not intimate. "She ready?" "Almost, just finishing her math." They stood in an awkward silence for a moment. Then Simone spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Everett, I'm sorry." It was the first time she had said it without a demand attached. It was a real apology, born of 2 years of lonely reflection and hard consequences. "I was a fool. I listened to them. I let them poison everything that was good. I am so, so sorry for what I did to you, to us." Everett looked at the mother of his child, a woman he had once loved beyond measure, and felt not anger, but a distant pity. "I forgave you a long time ago, Simone," he said, and he meant it. "I had to. For my own peace, not for your comfort. Go build a good life. Nia deserves a mother who is happy." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes, and turned to help Nia pack her school bag. Later that night, Everett tucked Nia into bed. On his nightstand, in a simple wooden frame, was the drawing she had made 2 years prior. The three figures, a man, a woman, and a child, holding hands in front of their little castle, a relic from a buried life. He looked at it and thought about wealth. Rosalind and her family had been obsessed with the appearance of it. The $1.6 million house, the $8,000 suits, the social status that was as fragile as a pane of glass. They had been drowning in riches, but were morally and spiritually bankrupt. They had taught him a valuable lesson. True wealth wasn't a number in a bank account. It was purpose, the feeling of building something meaningful with his own two hands. It was integrity, the quiet strength to stand up for what was right, even when he was terrified. And most of all, it was love, the pure, unconditional love of a child, a legacy passed down from his father, and a quiet, hopeful future that was finally, truly his own. True character isn't revealed when life is easy. It's forged in the fire of betrayal and defined by how we rise from the ashes. Thank you for joining us on Love Beyond Pride. If Everett's journey to find justice and build a new life inspired you, please consider subscribing and sharing this story with someone who needs a reminder that our greatest strength is often found when we are most underestimated.